Okay, so welcome everybody to this webinar hosted by Matrix Requirements. Today's session will be about developing AI-powered medical devices. So we'll look into the different aspects of artificial intelligence and how it impacts the medical device sector. And for this, I'm pleased to welcome our guest speakers. Today we have Leon Doorn, who is an independent consultant at CARE. We have Cyril Michaud, who is a managing partner at MD 101. And we have Tilman Schlenker, who is the CTO of Matrix Requirements. My name is Anna Grunkelsven. I'm head of RA QA at Matrix Requirements. So today, as I mentioned, we will look at different aspects of artificial intelligence on the medical device sector. We'll look into the benefits of using AI in medical devices, but we'll also deep dive into how it impacts the relationship between different teams, how it changes as well certain processes in the development, testing, and validation cycles. We'll look at some real-world examples, best practices, and as well, we'll touch on the regulatory requirements and how all of that is impacted by using AI. The webinar today will be approximately 1 hour, but at the end, we'll take some time to answer questions. We'll have a Q&A. So I encourage you to note down your questions in the chat, and we will come back to them and answer them at the end of today's session. So without further ado, let's get started. So maybe we can start with first question. What are the benefits of having AI integrated in medical devices? And maybe let's start first from a user experience point of view. What are the benefits, or what could be the benefits of AI in medical devices for the users? And maybe we can start with you, Leon.
Sure. Yeah. I think maybe it's important to call out as a first thing, right? We're talking about the benefits of AI, and I think one of the largest benefits, and we're seeing that in healthcare nowadays, is that the pressure on healthcare is increasing worldwide, I guess. But here, if you look specifically, for example, at the Netherlands, I think I read it last week, is that in 2040, it's expected that 1 in 7 of the Dutch public will actually need to work in healthcare in order to cope with the tremendous pressure on the healthcare system. And if you look at our society today, there's already a shortage of staff members in healthcare. That shortage is beyond doubt expected to increase. And then that's one end, but at the same time, we see the cost for healthcare rising rapidly. And at the same time, it's the question how we can afford healthcare, especially if a large portion of the population is going to work in healthcare, who are not working in other sectors. And then at the same time, you see that the costs just need to be paid for. So I think artificial intelligence is not necessarily the solution to this problem, in the sense that artificial intelligence will not solve necessarily the problem of having to pay for the healthcare sector or providing the necessary resources, but it can be of tremendous support in reducing the need on resources and potentially increasing efficiency. If you look over the recent years, I think we've seen a lot of AI applications entering the market. And I think, looking back at my experience where I come from, the way that AI was introduced, it was still in its infancy, and you see that it mainly was able to support users, and the support may not necessarily have the financial or resource benefits that you would expect. But then with the rise, with more data becoming available, with more clinical evidence becoming available, the role of AI can become bigger, and it can actually start supporting in diagnostic and treatment applications and potentially take over some of the tasks from doctors today. Once we see AI actually moving into that space, and I know there's already a few applications on the market that are taking those steps, then we'll see the benefits of AI actually reducing costs, but also AI being able to take over some of the resources of an already burdened healthcare system. So in my view, those are the benefits. Looking at AI, we've seen deep learning models being used over the recent years, mainly in radiology, in image analysis. But now with large language models, there might also be a benefit, for example, to be gained from an administrative purpose and in other fields of the healthcare sector.
Okay. Tilman, any further
I,
insight?
I don't have much to add. I also think that, especially on the administrative side, language models can be a big help with organizing non-structured information, which is quite hard with classical software, but is much easier with a language model. So I think there's lots of potential in simplifying the processes and also accessing data that might not have been entered in a structured way. So if you look at the German health sector, for example, there's lots of unstructured data, which with image recognition and so character recognition and a good language model, you might be able to tap where it's really hard to do it right now because it's just not in a form that can be used. So I think there's lots of potential there, not even going into the pure medical applications. At the same time, this is just the beginning and the quality has to be good for it to be acceptable in that area. So I think that's one of the critical points is to make sure that testing and quality checks are good enough for it to be deployed everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like we've seen in the imaging space, right? It's, I think the first solutions started to enter the market maybe around 8 years ago. And now you see that they're moving into the space where they're actually picking up some tasks that were previously done by a doctor or physician. And they might now take over some tasks. We've seen large language models entering the market, I think about 2 years ago. And maybe they're not really yet applied for medical devices. And they might be in the future, but also on administrative non-medical device tasks, they might enter the market in a number of years from now where they're good enough to actually take over tasks because large language models obviously come with a risk attached to it.
Right. So what I hear is that indeed AI does have a potential to make the healthcare system more efficient, right? Cyril, I see you.
Yes, yes. What can I add after Leon's and Tillman's descriptions? I think that, yes, the healthcare sector can benefit from AI for sure. So be it medical devices or not medical devices, okay? I think that given sometimes the difficulties that we have to validate that kind of algorithms, okay, chances are higher to have better outcomes in administrative tasks compared to pure medical device intended use. However, okay, I think I don't have to draw a too dark picture. Okay, of course we have medical devices performing well in the especially in the medical imaging sector. Okay, as Leon mentioned already until man, we've seen lots of medical devices working with AI. Okay, you can go, for example, to the FDA website where you have a list of all AI that have been FDA cleared, okay, through 510K or through a de novo. Okay, so we know that AI works actually for medical devices first when you have a medical intended use. And we see also that in the near future, we will have some other applications like the emerging large language models that you already talked about. Okay, we see that we have a very tremendous potential, okay, from that kind of technologies, even though today it's quite difficult still to assert that that kind of technology will fully work as intended for the healthcare sector, especially for the medical device intended use. For administrative tasks, this is another subject, but for medical device tasks, it is usually the bar is higher compared to administrative non-medical device software. So we are still in a phase, in a step where we are not so confident, okay, on the outcome that the technology is going to bring us. Okay, so confirmed for medical imaging, to be confirmed for some other technologies. And perhaps some attendants in the audience could say otherwise, but this is the landscape I see right now.
Okay, it's true. It's true that artificial intelligence in medical devices is not as new, but it's getting a lot more attention. And of course, these days there's a lot more happening in terms of regulations and requirements and attention that this whole field gets. And that, of course, is also a challenge for the ones that are developing the AI algorithms and the medical devices that are integrating them. So what about the impact that the integration of AI in a medical device can have on the collaborations between teams, how teams interact? Do you see changes there, things that need to be adapted from, let's say, the classical development of a medical device?
Do you want to answer this, Cyril?
Yes, if you want. So I've seen so in design teams, okay, we've seen some a new kind of people appearing, in fact, okay, namely the data scientists and people designing, I would say, crafting AI algorithms. Okay, this is in between science and art, I would say, crafting an AI algorithm. And yes, this is quite a new kind of job, a new kind of profile that is present right now in the software design team. Okay, and we can see, for example, usually teams separated either in two parts. Okay, people in AI, okay, and people in classical software, okay, like doing all the graphical user interface and all the plumber around the AI, okay. I've seen also another kind of organization, which is to have three categories, okay, three teams, in fact, inside the software development department. So the pure data scientists designing, crafting these AI algorithms, okay? And when they have an algorithm which is is promising, okay, then they pass it to a machine learning operations team in charge of the industrialization of that AI model, okay? And when this industrialization is performed, it can be integrated in the classical medical device software development, okay? So a twofold separation or three teams, okay? Of course, having three different teams is probably more common if you have a big company, okay, compared to a startup where everything is a little bit merged, even though you can still separate data scientists from people doing classical software.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can add anything to what you just mentioned. I agree. I think the separation of the teams, especially between classical software development and AI teams, make complete sense. Where I think if you look at a traditional medical device development process where you define your requirements, from requirements you go to the risks and the test cases. I guess in that sense, the AI development is not extremely different. However, the cycles as applicable to the definition of requirements and the testing, they may be slightly different than the software part. Just to give a practical example, if you develop an AI tool and you have your software being developed at the same time for a specific intended purpose, as you're actually training the algorithms, you might actually find that during the design and development of the algorithm that there's insufficient data available to actually develop the algorithm or to come to a performance level that's going to be sufficient to bring the device out into the field. I think medical device manufacturers should consider that there is sort of a two-stage part where stage one is your AI development and an algorithm development, and can you demonstrate on the training and tuning data sets that you might reach the performance level that's going to be sufficient for bringing it to the market. And then you have a transfer into the classical software development where you start building the software around this algorithm. And then the final product is then ready for your further verification and validation testing, and obviously also the AI testing part to ensure that the device is going to work as intended. And depending, I would say, on the type of device, and I don't think there's a lot of continuous learning devices out in the field today, but if you have a continuous learning device and you're intending to bring that to the market, then maybe you're having another transition at the end when you go from the traditional validation and testing of the algorithms and going to the market to a post-market stage where you have continuous development, which might involve, again, different expertises. So the AI team might actually have a place in the post-market stages where traditional software development would only be more support and maintenance and go back to new development of new products or new features.
Tilman?
Yeah, not much to add. I think from the perspective of a software developer, I would almost treat AI models like an external hardware component where you basically depend on finding something, either on the market or you get it from another team, but effectively you get something that fulfills a certain level of functionality, and you have to build your product around this functionality. So I think that's the hardest bit for a software developer, to switch that mindset, because if you're purely trying to solve a problem with software, you're used to being able to iterate over it long enough until you can really get to your goal, pretty much, by just investing enough engineering effort. And with AI, that's no longer the case. Like it's really something that you need to take as a given, and then whatever that level is, you can build your product on, or you have to decide that maybe your product design doesn't work with the AI model you get. And then the best you can do is give back time to the data scientists and the people working on the models to maybe improve it. But there's not much you can do as a software development team. So there's really this handover and this dependency, and you have to treat it as that. It's not something where you can throw people at the problem and try to get to a better performance on your side.
Hey, you might want to throw more data at the problem because
if you can get the data, that's for sure. Yes. I think that's actually the other interesting side of it is, as an engineering team, you need to think about if there's something you can do to collect data in the backend, basically, as the product is being used, and feed it back to the data scientists. I think that's definitely an interesting aspect, because you are the one who gets it out into the field. So you are the one who has the opportunity to actually maybe provide better data from the usage. So this kind of post-market aspect is definitely very interesting. So you need to feed back to the data scientists, because in the end, you are going to sit between them and the customer for most products.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very interesting aspect of AI being introduced in this medical device field. I like the comment about that it's also a bit an art to craft the AI model, but then again, we're facing requirements to be able to release a medical device to the market. You need to have a certain level of quality. So training those AI models to perform at least well enough to be released probably poses additional layer of complexity to the interaction between teams as well. Do you have any insights of best practices, how this handover can happen in a structured and well-defined way?
Yeah, from my perspective, right, at the end, you want to make sure, and I think if you look at the AI Act and the requirements of the AI Act, but similarly, if you look at the requirements of the FDA, but to be honest, I think more within the AI Act, if you look at the requirements on technical documentation, it demands a great amount of documentation of the AI algorithms, the choices that were made during the development of the AI algorithm, how the device has been trained, where the data has been coming from, documenting the data sources, documenting the characteristics of the full data set, and also the validation data. And ensuring that all that information is transferred to the development team, then the development team should get a pretty good understanding of what the device does, where potential limitations are, and how they should build it, and where risks might exist from a software perspective and from an AI perspective. So I would say it's just more, and it might be a next design stage, that is the AI development design stage. It might be in isolation, separate from the software development stage. It might be in parallel, it might be before it, but I would say it should take a prominent place in the software development process, and you should have a proper design stage review to ensure that the documentation that comes out of that software development is there, is available, and can be transferred to the other software development teams. That will be my view. I'm really curious to hearing Cyril and Tilman here as well.
Yeah, yes, as you said, where the AI development resides can be a bit disconnected from the rest of the software development. But I think that the most probable case is to have the AI software development parallel to the classical software development, in fact. Even though the pace of the AI software development is a bit different from a classical agile software development. Okay, for example, you can have sprints lasting 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, whatever. Okay, but what could happen, for example, is that when you have the software development running in sprints, okay, during that time you could have only output of the AI design team only every 3 sprints, for example. Okay, because the pace of the AI software development could be usually, by experience, lower, okay, compared to the pace of the classical software development. Okay, given the fact that you need to collect data, you need to select data, groom data, analyze data, segment data, and all that process usually can take a longer time compared to what you have in a classical software development process. First thing. And second thing about software documentation, I fully agree with you, Leon, that we should have a software AI model development documentation, okay, as an output of that parallel process, okay, so that it can be integrated in the product design file, in fact, okay. We shall have a DHF for the software as a whole, okay, so and within that DHF, of course, we need the DHF for the AI part of the software.
Tilman, from a software development point of view?
Yeah, agree. I think nothing special on the software development side there. I think Cyril said it all. I think generally also things like risk analysis probably needs to be done on the AI side, just as it needs to be done on the software side. And in general, looking at the team structures, it's really not that different from having multiple software teams working with each other when one has a dependency on another and depends on the artifacts, libraries, or whatever that team produces that other teams need to use, so that the teams need to be able to establish communication channels, and the product designers working on the different teams need to be able to work together and adjust their designs based on the output of the teams. So I would really treat the kind of the data science AI teams as just another agile team or whatever the structure is, and integrate it using typical approaches to cross-team cooperation in agile environments.
Okay, so what I hear is that there are indeed, I mean, there is a place for the data scientists, there is a place for the software developers. At the end of the road, we still need to bring all the information together. And then we also need to do verification and validation of the end product. So the software, including the AI. So how does, is there actually a benefit of using AI? Can we leverage the power of AI to facilitate that process itself while as well integrating AI into a medical device? So there are two aspects there. You have the validation and verification of a medical device that has an AI component, but can we also make use of AI to leverage, to improve, to facilitate the whole VNV? And how would it actually affect this VNV cycles in this way?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you a first answer, but maybe Cyril, you want to go first?
If you want, so about the AI tools, okay, used to ease the VNV. So far, I've never seen any kind of tool like this. Okay, so maybe you could have, for example, AI to generate some data augmentation. Okay, for your verification and your validation, you could use tool like this, but I've never seen that so far. So perhaps maybe someone in the audience has examples like this, but I've never seen that in my experience. So this is for the QMS software tool part. And then for the VNV part, the very specific characteristics of AI validation, okay, is that you have a direct link to clinical validation, in fact. Because usually excepted some cases, okay, all cases can be in nature, okay, but for most of medical devices, the AI technical performance is directly linked to the product medical device clinical performance. Okay, so you have a direct link like this, which means that first, when you are in design stage, it can be interesting to have early pre-validation of your AI algorithms, okay, to be sure that the technical performance will meet the future clinical performance of the device when it is fully integrated and developed, okay, first thing. So it means that you could have early testing, or that could be testing on a clinical retrospective data, that could be testing on with a real clinical investigation with human subjects. Okay. But also when you are in the VNV phase, okay, especially in the validation phase, you need real world data representative of the people targeted by the intended use of your product. Okay, so you can see directly that if you don't have the right data, you can't validate correctly your AI model. So this is why you have a direct link between the clinical performance of your device and the technical performance of your AI. And this is very important to be sure that you have the right data to perform, of course, the training, the fine-tuning, but also the validation.
Yeah, I'm just also thinking, and your question is related specifically onto verification and validation testing. And I'm also seeing in the chat one comment from one of the participants on whether it could be complicated to use AI in design and development. And she's mentioning that it's also used today already in the production of cars and planes, for example. And that these can be, these are clearly verified and validated. And I agree, I think you can use AI maybe in verification and validation testing. There might be opportunities for such devices to help you generate test cases, but even you could imagine testing programs based on AI that actually test the system in much more broad and much faster than we could do as humans, because as we all know, software and AI can have enormous scales of outcomes, which is going to be very hard for human and even for just traditional software to test, whereas AI offers the great opportunity to easily test a vast amount of data within a medical device and all the potential outcomes a device could generate, and potentially testing edge cases that we would not consider as human beings. So I think AI has a clear perspective in helping us in developing software and software systems using AI. On the other hand, I think also AI systems can help us from a regulatory perspective to prep regulatory documentation, or just to read our regulatory documentation and see if there's any reasoning flaws in our technical documentation and detect potentials for improving it. Same with risk assessments. It could verify the logic behind the risk assessments and see if there's any reasoning flaws in the risk assessment. At the same time, I think we need to be careful, right? And I think you called it out before, CDU as well, is that AI is, and maybe Tilman, I think you also mentioned it, AI is not perfect, and large language models are not perfect. So I would be a bit cautious in trying to use AI as a tool to autonomously create, for example, at this stage, regulatory documentation without the human reading it, because AI is only as good as the data that has gone in it. But when you're presented with an entirely new medical device that it has not seen before, where it's not been used in clinical practice, then can you really rely on AI to consider what potential risks for that software would be when used in clinical practice? I think not, personally. I think you always need to have a human to verify the outcomes and to be ultimately responsible for the technical documentation. But I think that's anyway enforced by the regulation, because the manufacturer at the end of the day is responsible for the device being developed. Does that answer the question?
Definitely.
Yes, if you don't mind, what I can add, okay, to be more precise about a consequence of the QMS, okay, you could have trouble validating a QMS software tool made with AI, okay, according to the clause 416 of the ISO 13485, especially, okay. You could have trouble validating that, okay, given the fact that an AI is never perfect so far. So yes, I agree with Leon. Okay, we always need some human oversight over the AI output. Okay, so that it can be always reviewed by some qualified person. Okay, before it is the output document is marked as approved in the QMS. In fact.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because indeed we have this requirement to also validate the tools that we use in our QMS. We also have the requirement to validate these kind of tools when used in production or servicing, for example. So any thoughts on that when you use an AI, for example, in the release process in a production? How much impact would that have in terms of validation, in terms of human intervention that is still required? Any idea about current requirements on that front? Because 13485 is quite clear that you need to validate those tools, but how far at this moment could we rely on AI for having, let's say, specific approval gates in the production towards the release of a medical device?
Well, if you look at the coding tools that are used today, like Copilot, for example, to generate automatically code that is used in the development of a product, I think you should still have a human in the loop to test all of it through verification and validation testing. But I guess a great portion of verification and validation testing might be automated as well through AI. So I guess it comes down to the same answer, is that at the end of the day, you do want a human in the loop to test, and you want to have that level of human oversight that Sidu also just mentioned, in my view. I don't think there's specific regulatory limitations to using AI in generating regulatory documentation by law. But as a notified body, I would be very cautious if someone sent me a file that's been generated with AI, or where the code has been fully generated using AI. Not sure, Cyril or Tilman, if you have another opinion here.
Well, I mean, on the purely software side of things, I would say AI is a really good tool to find inconsistencies in your code or in your test cases or in system behavior or quality. It's not a very good tool to make up the specifications that you need. So in the end, it's just a more convenient development tool, but you need a human to have a consistent specification of what you want. And maybe the code that you need to write to do testing doesn't have to be as complex anymore, because the computer systems will do most of it for you. And it might also just generate synthetic data that makes it easier to test much more cases. But in the end, it comes down to you giving the right instructions and input to the system so it can actually validate something correctly. So I hope that's where we're going, is that, you know, both with the code generators and the test generators, that they will just take away a lot of the repetitive work that we usually have to do these things, and let us concentrate more on the core work, which is writing specifications.
I'm happy to hear that a human being still has a role in the whole process. We mentioned before, and there are several products and also medical devices that integrate AI already today on the market. Could you share from experience some real world examples how these manufacturers document and tackle, let's say, the challenges that AI brings today, and how maybe the changes now in the regulatory space will introduce changes or will force them to improve or change certain processes?
Yes, so perhaps I can give you an experience from how it is treated by the FDA or by notified bodies. Okay, I hope notified bodies are not present in the audience. But what I've seen, especially from the FDA, is that when you want when you present them your validation strategy to validate your software, you receive from the FDA really a masterclass. Okay, they are going to challenge the way you validate your product. Okay, your validation plan. Especially if you go to that in a pre-sub meeting, okay, when you can ask them questions, you are going to have in front of you very knowledgeable people, okay, that are going to challenge your validation plan, that are going to give you the right insights on how to define your endpoints, how to define your validation strategy of your software. Okay, this is really and with a hands-on approach, okay, specific to your product. Okay, compared to what I've seen for the CE marking process, where we saw technical file reviewers, okay, taking the standards, okay, by the book and ticking the boxes, okay, for the 6234 and for the 8234-1, okay. Okay, this is a way to do it. This is the way for the notified bodies. Okay, this is how the regulation is made. But I think that this is quite better to have the FDA approach. Okay, so this is some hands-on experience. Then coming back to the regulations or to the reference, okay, in terms of standards or things like this, up to now we don't have any kind of very well-defined standard as what we have with the 6234 standard, for example. Okay, when you develop AI models, okay, you can throw away the 6234. Okay, I'm a bit exaggerating when I say that, but this is almost this. Okay, so in fact, this is up to you as a manufacturer to define the documentation you need, okay, to validate your software, to demonstrate that the software has been developed and designed the right way. Okay, so we have some emerging documentation about that. We know that, for example, you can have a predefined change control plan from the FDA. Okay, we can have things like this. Okay, we know that we need a validation plan, a validation report, but this is not as well defined as it is for classical software. The state of the art is being established. Okay, so things are going to move that way. Okay, for a better state of the art on how to build the documentation on AI design and validation. But so far, we are still in some muddy waters on how to document AI modeling.
Although, if I can add, if I look at the FDA, in my experience, you'll find indeed a super knowledgeable group of people that are challenging your validation strategy, but they're not, to date, very keen on asking a vast amount of documented information rather than your validation strategy and showing that your device is working properly, including all the subgroup analysis, etc. If I look, and I have just one customer, and they've received their feedback from the notified body this week, and it's one of the first notified bodies, I think, in Europe that starts already to audit against the requirements that are set out in the AI Act. And our customer has received quite an extensive list of questions with regards to, can you describe all the decisions that were made, for example, during the design and development of your AI algorithm? Why have you set certain thresholds in your AI algorithm? How did you come to those decisions? And they're also very specific on, can you show me risks with regards to the AI? And they provided us with a list of where they actually expect these risks to be represented in the risk management documentation. They expected the requirements as a result of those to be documented as part of the requirements, and they asked for very specific requirements. For example, the representativeness of the data sets and risks with regards to the representativeness of the data sets. All risks that are extremely logical when you're looking at an AI device, and I would think that manufacturers should include that anyway. But this is the first time that I'm actually seeing a notified body being very specific on the AI Act. And where previously the FDA, for me, at the highest standard, it seems that the notified body has beefed up quite a lot and is increasing the standard of what they're requesting from manufacturers. And I think we'll see other notified bodies follow soon. So it's a very interesting one to monitor and to watch and to see how this is playing out in the field. But as a manufacturer, I would not wait with already looking at the Annex, I think Annex 4 from the AI Act with regards to the requirements on technical documentation. Start putting that on paper today, because your notified body will ask for it.
Yes. And so when we think indeed, so it's a learning curve for all parties, I would say. But then when we look at what guidances and standards that are being published today, Cyril, you mentioned 62304 is maybe less applicable or more difficult to adhere to when we integrate AI. What would be your recommendation for developers of AI-enabled medical devices to really focus on today? If they actually, it's two parts, the question. One's for the ones that are bringing a device for the first time to the market, being it EU or US, and the ones that actually have a device on the market but need to adapt their documentation to AI Act or FDA policies and so on.
Okay, so perhaps I prefer leaving the AI Act subject a bit apart, because how we are going to open a Pandora box, okay, which is going to be difficult to close. If I stay just on the standards question that you mentioned, we can't wait for medical device specific standards so far, okay, and we can see what has been done in other industries, okay, and in software development in general. As of today, we have a standard, okay, Leon knows that pretty much. We have a standard called the ISO 5338, which is about AI software development. And more precisely, the additional tasks you have to do over a classical software development process. Okay, so that standard, the ISO 5338, is going to give you the keys on how to update your software development procedures, okay, by updating the current procedures or adding new procedures or instructions specific to the AI software development. And I think this is that one that should be reviewed by people doing software development and AI development right now. For medical devices, we have two standards being developed, okay? One about verification and one about validation. And the numbers of these standards, if you are curious, are the ISO 63450, okay, for verification, 63450, and for validation, that will be the ISO 63521. Okay, a bit tough with the numbers, okay, but this is the two standards that will deal with V&V for medical devices that are going to be that are still in draft. Okay, so it's difficult to find them when you are on the ISO website, but these are the standards that are going to circulate as draft version soon, for probably in early or mid 2025.
Actually, the 62304 is right now open for a ballot. It's in the COD stage. It means it will move forward to I think it will move forward to, so it's now a committee draft. It will move forward to a, I think, how you call it? I think it's working draft, and then it will move forward to a final version. But I'm not 100% sure of the correct stage names. But go ahead.
So you will have a CD in October.
It's
okay.
out right now.
Yes, and then you will have a FDIS in
Exactly.
2025.
Yep. So the current version is already quite complete. We're gathering the comments as we go. I know I only can say a little bit about the 62304 as I'm involved in the standard committee. But the other standard I do not know. But the verification testing one is mainly going to describe what type of test methods you can use and can apply when testing an AI algorithm. It's based on, I don't know the other number. It's based on an international standard as well. That's not medical device specific. And we've taken the methodologies described in there and tried to adapt them so that you can use them for the development of medical devices. And the other standard, I think the validation standard, is more about how you test an AI system. And it's also a great one indeed to follow. I can add to the ones you mentioned, Cyril, is that from the European Commission, maybe it's now official, I'm not sure, but the European Commission is drafting a guidance that will be published before the end of this year around the definition of what an AI system actually is. So that's an interesting one to follow. And another one is on what high-risk AI systems will be, which is expected in the beginning of next year. Initially, we saw, I think 2-3 years ago, we saw on the MDCG working group agenda that there was an intention to bring a guidance document in MDCG for specific AI-enabled medical devices. It got taken off from the list, to my surprise, so it was gone again. But just now recently, after the publication of the AI Act, we saw that it's being added again. So a MDCG document should be drafted by a working group and should be published somewhere in the future. I cannot say when, and I cannot say what will be in it, but it is under development, which is a good sign, because there's clearly, to touch a little bit on the interaction between the MDR and the AI Act, there's clearly some questions that need answering, especially with regards to the definition. Is something actually considered a high-risk AI system or not? Because it seemed initially that all medical devices would be, but then the European Commission clarified that there might some be that do use AI, but are not going to be considered high risk, even though there might be high-risk medical devices. So where that boundary exactly will be and how that will play out is also a very interesting one to monitor. But keep monitoring. I don't know anything else. What is a better way to monitor it than just to be a member of an industrial organization like COSIR or MedTech Europe, or get your information from an ISO committee, SC42, JC21, or perhaps TC62.
Yeah, it's really challenging indeed, and I can imagine, Tilman, you know that compliance in your documentation and so on from day one is important, but to tackle all these new requirements and so on, any final thoughts on how to deal with this?
All I can say is don't start at the end. Try to do everything you need to do while you develop. That just makes your life a lot easier.
Great. So looking at the time, I think we can close the discussion for now. So thank you very much, Leon, Cyril, and Tilman, for your insights. And I'll have a look at a few of the questions that were submitted. Going back to actually the start of the discussion, medical device development typically use waterfall model, but use of AI in medical device development, is there a shift towards agile methodologies? And how would that affect then the interaction between the different teams? Maybe that's one for Tilman.
Yeah. So I can just go by what I've seen so far. I think most AI projects are inherently agile in some way. They're really hard to just do waterfallish, since you can't just write a specification and implement it. When it comes to the interactions, I think it's like every boundary between different teams that deliver in different cycles. So it's really, I mean, there's lots of approaches like scaled Scrum methodologies, and basically, if you look at the corporate agile world, there's lots of ways to synchronize agile teams, and I think this applies in a very similar way. You just need to make sure that deliveries are done in a reliable way, that requirements are shared between the teams so they don't get isolated. And probably it helps if the software team itself is also agile, because they can adjust more quickly. If the AI just has a different output or capability than you expected. But in the end, that's going to be boundaries between the teams. And I would expect AI to be basically agile or something similar. And software teams can integrate it whatever way they want to do it.
Okay. There is another question. What about the use of PCCP predetermined change control plans for devices that use continuous development and learning algorithms? Cyril, I think you mentioned it briefly.
Yes, so this is possible to have continuous learning algorithms in production, okay, comma, in the US, not in Europe so far. Okay. We hope that we'll have some MDCG guides about that in the near future, as Leon mentioned. We have great expectations about these MDCG guides, by the way. Coming back to the PCCP, this is something that is possible with the FDA. The FDA can approve, okay, before your device is put in production, can approve a given rate of continuous learning algorithm, and can approve then a given type of drift, I would say, in the performance. Of course, the drift should be enhancement of the performance of your device. Okay, so if you are able to bring evidence to the FDA that thanks to that PCCP and the way your device is designed, the change of performance of your device, continuously learning, that change of performance will be a positive change, okay, something enhancing the performance of your device, then, or not degrading the kind of the risk profile of your device, of course, at the same time, then that PCCP will be approved by the FDA. Okay. Usually it means that, for example, you have a given endpoint and you are going to, for example, increase the sensitivity or the specificity on that endpoint, for example. Okay. In the PCCP, you cannot add new endpoints, for example. Okay. That would be very uncommon, okay, improbable that the FDA accepts new endpoints in your PCCP. However, enhancing the outcome of already validated endpoints is possible.
Maybe I can add a little bit for the EU and under the AI Act, because if you read the AI Act, there's also talks about predetermined changes, which is nice. So it sort of seems to open up the same route as the FDA has in the EU. The only point is that for conformity assessments, manufacturers are pointed back to the conformity assessment traditionally followed under the MDR. So actually the MDR might then again limit that opportunity that the AI Act seems to introduce. What is possible, I think, and what I see companies do is agree with the notified body on the change control procedures. Clearly, not all changes need to be reported to the notified body. Only substantial changes or significant changes per the definitions that the notified body agrees on with the manufacturer. You could argue that a manufacturer could install in their procedures a limit to what they constitute as a significant change and what they do not constitute as a significant change. If you, for example, alter the performance to a level where you say it's not a substantial change to your product, let's say you retrain the algorithm and you can demonstrate on the same or improved data set that the performance is slightly better than on the previous one, but not a significant change or a significant improvement, then you might not need to go past your notified body. That does open up to some extent the opportunity for manufacturers in the EU as well to have continuous learning, but it needs to be ensured that the design change control procedures are aligned and that your notified body has approved those, because otherwise you run the risk that the notified body might later on not agree that you have released the device onto the market without their explicit approval. The way it works now, if I understand correctly, is that notified bodies need to document in the agreement with the manufacturer what their design change definitions are and when you would need to report those. So it's always good to look at your own procedures, what you agreed with in your own procedures, but also to review the contract that is in place with the notified body with regard to what needs to be reported to the notified body and when.
Yes, so we can have variations from one notified body to another, okay?
Yeah, which is frustrating.
The advantage of the FDA is that you know, okay, ex ante, okay, prior to placing your device on the market, you know ex ante that you will have accepted changes, okay? While with notified body, that would be ex post, okay? When you perform the change, then you have to raise the question, should I have to warn my notified body about that change?
Okay, and maybe one last question, quick question, because there are actually a few questions related to this topic as well. What about ISO 40001? Would you recommend implementing it? What should manufacturers do with this standard? And I know, Leon, you have an opinion about this one.
Well, so maybe I'm not sure in how far I can actually make statements about it, but during the development of 42001 within ISO, there has been quite a lot of debate and pushback on how it was written. And there's a big push from a lot of the organizations to have a standard available. And it was developed in a short time frame without the AI Act being published. Clearly, that caused the standard to not align with the European AI Act. And that at the same time is a risk for a manufacturer who decides to implement it. So you might implement it, you obtain your certification, but then you might find out that when the harmonized standards are coming out in the European Union, under the AI Act, that this standard is not going to be the standard that's going to be harmonized under the AI Act. Does that mean that this standard is useless to implement? Not necessarily, because there's if you implement it in a good way, you use the comments that are in there, you address the requirements from the Annex A, and you make sure that that is used as an addition to your ISO 13485, it surely cannot harm, and it surely will increase your posture as an organization towards future standards that may come. And it's a good point of evidence demonstrating that you've considered already requirements with regards to AI. Again, read it in very close relation to the AI Act itself and the requirements in the AI Act, because additional requirements may apply that are in the AI Act but are not in ISO 42001. If you want to get a certificate for it, I would recommend, my personal recommendation is to wait for the European Commission to come out with a recommendation on what will be a harmonized standard. within ISO, they started up a new initiative to actually develop a new QMS standard that will be the one that's going to be proposed for harmonization under the AI Act. What will be in that standard is still to be determined, and how much it aligns with ISO 42001 I cannot answer right now. I'm not actively in that working group. So my recommendation is look at the requirements, see what is useful to your organization, implement those parts, and wait for the other parts till there is more information from the European Commission or from ISO.
Right. So looking at the time, I think it's time to end today's session. I think it was maybe too short, but super useful, super valuable. I want to thank the speakers, so Tilman, Leon, and Cyril. Thank you very much for your insights. I also want to thank everybody who joined. I hope it was valuable and insightful for all of you. I would want to encourage you as well to look at our website, because there is a lot more information on this topic there. And with that, thanks again for joining, and I wish you all a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.